Welcome, bookish souls, to a sanctuary where the love for reading knows no bounds. Today, we embark on a soul-stirring journey through the pages of Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. Your support on YouTube means everything to me. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to give them a thumbs up and hit that subscribe, follow button. And if you have any thoughts or questions, drop a comment below. I love hearing from you. Chapter 1. Kurt Vonnegut tells the reader that he did actually know someone who was killed in Dresden for taking a teapot, and he really did know someone who said he would hire gunmen to kill his enemies after the war. Moreover, he really did go back to Dresden after the war in 1967 thanks to Guggenheim money. He went back with his friend Bernard V. O'Hare. He met and befriended a taxi driver who took him to the slaughterhouse where he hid with other pals during the Dresden bombing. He says that was not easy to write about the Dresden bombing, despite his best intentions. A friend asks Vonnegut if his book about the Dresden bombing will be an anti-war book. Vonnegut says yes. His friend replies, "Why don't you write an anti-glacier book instead?" 3. Vonnegut gets drunk one night and has the phone company look up his friend Bernard V. O'Hare. He talks to him about his idea of writing about the Dresden bombing. Bernard does not know much about writing, so he is not much help. Then Vonnegut describes how he once wrote a great outline for the book in crayon on the back of a roll of wallpaper. He drew one line in one color for each person in the story, and each line ended when the person died. All the lines ended on the day he and all the other prisoners he was with were exchanged for Russian prisoners. As they rode back from the exchange, a British soldier shows him his secret treasure of a plaster model of the Eiffel Tower with a clock in it. Then he came home, was married, and had kids. Sometimes he tries to call up old girlfriends, but the phone company cannot find them. Sometimes he thinks about his education at the University of Chicago. He tells his father he has never written a book with a villain in it because the University of Chicago's anthropology department told him that there is no difference between anybody. He remembers his job working as a reporter while he was in college. The toughest reporters were women. One of them tells him to pretend he is from the fire department to get a statement from a woman whose husband was killed in a freak accident in an elevator. She asks if the sight of the body bothered him, but he replies that he saw much worse in World War I. Vonnegut mentions that more people were killed in the Dresden raid than at Hiroshima. He tells someone about the Dresden raid. The person he was talking to tells him about the atrocities of the concentration camps. Vonnegut just responds that he knows. He continues to work in Schenectady. He and his wife meet other veterans. The friendliest and funniest ones who hate war the most actually fought. He tries to get information about the raid from the Air Force, but they tell him that it is secret. Vonnegut travels with his family to O'Hare's house. His young daughters have to stop and see the Hudson River because they had never seen a river before. Vonnegut sits down to talk with O'Hare. Mary, Bernard's wife, is angry and interrupts them constantly. Eventually, she tells Vonnegut that she is angry at him for wanting to write a book where he and her husband are big heroes that will be played in the movie version by big stars when they were really just babies, 14. Vonnegut tells her that he does not want to do that. He tells her that he will call the book The Children's Crusade. Vonnegut and O'Hare look up the Children's Crusade and learn it was actually a ploy by two monks in 1213 to sell large groups of children into slavery in North Africa. In another book, Vonnegut reads about the Prussian destruction of Dresden in 1760. As the Vonnegut family returns home, they stop at the World's Fair in New York. In an aside to his publisher, Vonnegut says that the book is short and jumbled because that is how massacres are. Then he says that he has told his sons never to take part in massacres of any kind. When he tries to travel with O'Hare to Germany, he is stuck in Boston because of fog. Time drags on endlessly as he waits. He reads about a French World War I veteran named Celine who became a doctor and wrote grotesque novels at night. Then he reads about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and how Lot's wife was turned into a pillar of salt because she looked back. Vonnegut says that he is a pillar of salt too. Chapter 2. Billy Pilgrim is unstuck in time. 23. He moves from one moment of his life to another as though they did not happen in any order. He cannot control where he goes next, and many of the trips are unpleasant. Pilgrim is born in 1922 in Ilium, New York. He fights in World War I, goes to the Ilium School of Optometry, has a nervous breakdown, returns to his studies, marries the founder and owner of the school, becomes an optometrist, and makes a lot of money selling frames for safety glasses. Billy has 2 children. His daughter marries another optometrist, and Billy sets him up in business. His son is a troublemaker in high school, but straightens out in the army, where he becomes a Green Beret in Vietnam. Billy survives a plane crash, and his wife accidentally killed by carbon monoxide poisoning. Billy comes home from the hospital and then goes to New York City and talks on the radio about having become unstuck in time. He is kidnapped by a flying saucer in 1967 and displayed naked in a zoo on Tralfamadore with the actress Montana Wildhack. His daughter is shocked that he would say this, and she brings him back to Ilium. Billy writes a letter to the Ilium news leader describing the Tralfamadorans. They look like 2-foot-tall plungers with their suction cups on the bottom and a flexible shaft pointing straight up. On top of the shaft, there is a hand with a green eye in the palm. They are friendly, and they see in 4 dimensions. When someone dies, Tralfamadorans know that the person only seems to die. The dead are still alive in the still existing past. When someone dies, they just say, "So it goes." 27. They see time as we see the Rocky Mountains, as a series of permanent fixtures. Billy works feverishly on his second letter. He is in his house, where the temperature is only 50 degrees because the thermostat is broken. His daughter, Barbara, rings the doorbell, but Billy does not answer. She enters the house, puts Billy to bed, and calls a repairman to fix the thermostat. Barbara thinks Billy is senile and needs to be cared for. Billy actually comes unstuck in time in 1944. He is a chaplain's assistant in the Army and has no friends. On maneuvers in South Carolina, an umpire in their war game tells them that their congregation was spotted from the air and killed. The men all laugh and eat lunch. Then Billy is given a furlough because his father dies in a hunting accident. Billy is sent overseas and is caught behind German lines in the Battle of the Bulge. He and an anti-tank gunner named Roland Weary follow 2 Army scouts through the woods. Someone shoots at them. The others dive for cover, but Billy gives the shooter another chance. Roland pulls him angrily into a ditch. Roland Weary is a stupid, fat bully of a young soldier who wants to be a war hero. He was unpopular at home and had no friends. His father collects torture instruments. Roland carries every piece of army equipment he was issued. He also carries a copy of the first dirty picture ever to be taken. A naked woman attempting to have sex with a Shetland pony. The scouts tell them it is time to move. Weary feels like he is the leader because he is doing the most, even though everything he does is pointless and pleases no one. He has delusions of military heroism and imagines that he and the scouts have banded together and call themselves the 3 Musketeers. Billy comes unstuck in time. He returns to the womb. Then he is in the IMCA with his father, who teaches him how to swim by throwing him into the deep end of the pool. He falls unconscious on the bottom of the pool. He falls unconscious on the bottom of the pool as someone rescues him, which he resents. Billy is in a nursing home visiting his mother, who no one expects to live through a bout with pneumonia. However, she does survive. He sees the body of a former marathon runner being wheeled out. Then he goes to the waiting room and reads about Private Eddie D. Slovak, the only American to be shot for cowardice since the Civil War. Then Billy is drunk at a party and about to be unfaithful to his wife for the first and only time. Then he crawls into his car and tries to drive home. He thinks his steering wheel has been stolen. He wakes up the next morning and realizes he got into the back seat. Billy returns to World War II. Roland Weary is shaking him to his senses. Billy tells him to go on without him, but Weary refuses. Instead, he kicks and pushes Billy back to where the scouts are waiting. The scouts hear a German patrol looking for them. The scouts decide they will leave Weary and Pilgrim behind. Billy is at a Chinese restaurant in 1957. He has just been elected president of the Lions Club and is about to make a speech. Billy is terrified because he has a very weak voice. However, he hears a very strong voice coming out of his mouth when he speaks to the crowd. He took a course on public speaking. Returning to World War II, Weary takes out his frustration by beating up Billy. Billy sounds like he is laughing. Before Roland can kick Billy in the spinal cord, he sees that a German patrol is watching him and wondering why one American soldier would want to murder another one and why the other soldier would laugh. Chapter 3. 5 German soldiers stare at Weary and Pilgrim. They are joined by a shivering German shepherd named Princess that they borrowed from a farmer. They were assigned to mop up in the wake of the German advance. 2 of the Germans are in their teens. 2 others are drooling, toothless old men. Their commander is a middle-aged corporal who is sick of war. The commander wears a pair of very nice boots that are all he owns in the world. Next to him stands a 15-year-old boy wearing wooden clogs held on his feet by canvas straps. The 15-year-old helps Billy stand up. Then they hear the 3 German rifle shots that kill the army's scouts who ditched Billy and Roland. They were waiting in ambush for the Germans, but they are shot from behind. The middle-aged corporal searches Billy and Roland. They take Roland's trench knife, his bulletproof Bible, and his picture of the girl with the pony. Then he makes Roland take off his boots and trade them with the 15. Billy in his broken boots and Roland in his clogs are marched to Stone Cottage where pals are kept. Billy sleeps on the shoulder of a chaplain who happens to be a rabbi. Billy travels in time to his optometry practice in Ilium. He is falling asleep as he is testing a female patient. He does not know what year it is. He looks out the window at the license plate on his car and sees that it is 1967. He reads an article about optometry and tries hard to care. Billy returns to 1944 as a German soldier is kicking his feet and telling him to wake up. The Germans take pictures of Roland and Billy's footwear for propaganda. Then they throw Billy into a bush and take a picture of soldiers pretending to capture him. Then Billy goes back to 1967. He is driving through a section of town that was wrecked by inner-city riots and the National Guard that came in to stop them. Then he arrives at a construction site for urban renewal. Billy has a framed prayer in his office saying, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom always to tell the difference." 60. Billy realizes he cannot change the past, the present, or the future. Billy is introduced to a Marine major who spoke to the Lions Club. Billy says that his son is a Green Beret. The major says that he should be proud of his son. Billy says he is. Then Billy goes back home to take a nap to help him prevent the fits of quiet weeping that attack him every so often. He is rich, despite his expectations. His daughter is about to get married. He lies down on the bed but cannot fall asleep. Instead, he weeps. He hears the doorbell ring and goes downstairs. A crippled man offers to sell him magazines that will never come. Billy returns to Luxembourg in 1944. He is being marched along with all the other pals. Roland Weary is in front of him, and Roland's feet are pools of blood from the clogs he is wearing. As the prisoners march back, German reserves rush to the front. One of them spits on Roland Weary. The Americans come to a series of railway cars that will take them deep into Germany. The Germans divide the men into rank and put them into railway cars. A wheezing, dying colonel keeps repeating, "It's me, boys. It's Wild Bob." 66. Then Vonnegut says that he was actually there, and so was his friend Bernard V. O'Hare. Pilgrim and Weary are crammed into separate boxcars. Billy meets an ex-hobo who says that he has been in worse situations than this. Billy looks out of a ventilator. In another car, men are calling out that a man died in there. After a while, the Germans open a door and pull out the corpse of Wild Bob. The trains begin to pull out in late December. Billy's train does not move for 2 days. In the meantime, food and water are passed into the cars through the ventilators and excrement is thrown out of the ventilators. The men take turns lying down to sleep. Christmas arrives. Billy returns to 1967, to the night he is kidnapped by the Tralfamadorans. Chapter 4. It is the night before Barbara's wedding and Billy cannot sleep. Because his wife is asleep, he gets out of bed and goes downstairs to wait for the flying saucer that he knows is coming to kidnap him. Billy comes slightly unstuck in time and watches a war movie backwards. Then it goes forward again. Billy walks outside. The flying saucer from Tralfamador arrives. It shoots him with a ray that makes him want to climb the rungs of the ladder. It lowers down to him. The Tralfamadorans ask Billy if he has any questions. He asks, "Why me?" 76. They simply respond that there is no why for him or for them. They are all there because the moment is structured to make them pick him up and carry him to Tralfamador. They administer an anesthetic to Billy. Billy falls asleep and wakes up in a boxcar crossing Germany in 1944. He tries to lie down and sleep, but none of the soldiers there want him to sleep near them because Billy kicks, tosses, and whimpers in his sleep. The hobo keeps telling him that things are not that bad. On the 9th day of their journey, the hobo dies. On the same day, in the boxcar ahead of them, Roland Weary dies from gangrene started in his torn-up feet. Roland Weary has been telling everyone about the Three Musketeers and that it is Billy Pilgrim's fault that he is dying. The train arrives at the POW camp on the 10th day. It was originally an extermination camp for Russian prisoners. The guards lead the Americans into the camp, giving each American a coat from a prisoner who had died. Billy is the only one to receive a coat from a dead civilian. The prisoners are sent into a delousing station. Billy is small and weak, as are many other Americans. One of the better bodies belongs to a high school history teacher and tennis coach named Edgar Derby. He will be killed in 68 days for taking a teapot in Dresden. The worst body belongs to Paul Lazaro, who promised Roland Weary that he would make Billy Pilgrim pay for killing Roland. As the showers turn on, Billy goes back to infancy and sees his parents cooing over him. Then, Billy is an optometrist playing golf on a Sunday. Then Billy is on a flying saucer going to Tralfamadore. Billy asks him where they are and how they got there. The Tralfamadoran tells him that there is no reason. The event simply happened. Billy says that it sounds like the Tralfamadoran does not believe in free will. The Tralfamadoran replies that out of all the beings in the universe, only Earthlings speak of free will. Chapter 5. Tralfamadorans do not see stars as points of light. Instead, they see where all the stars have been and where they are going, like luminous spaghetti, 87. 87. They see humans as millipedes with babies' legs on one end and old people's legs on the other, 87. Billy requests something to read on the flying saucer. The only Earth book they have is The Valley of the Dolls. He asks for a Tralfamadoran novel, but he cannot read it. The aliens explain that it is actually just a series of events that, when read simultaneously as a Tralfamadoran con, show the depth and breadth of life. Billy falls back in time to his family's trip to the Grand Canyon. Billy is afraid of it. When his mother touches him, he wets his pants. Someone asks a ranger how many people kill themselves in the canyon. He says about 3 per year. Billy then goes ahead 10 days to his family's stop in Carlsbad Caverns. Billy is afraid again. The guide turns off all the lights to show them total darkness. Instead, Billy sees his father's watch glowing in the dark. Billy returns to the POW camp. They are clean and their clothes are deloused. Their names are listed in a record of POWs so that they are officially alive. A German beats up an American because he does not like something the American said. Billy is given a dog tag by the Germans with a piece to be broken off if the person dies. Edgar Derby will have his piece broken off when he is executed in Dresden. The Americans are marched to a barracks where British officers are held. They are singing to the Americans. The Brits continually try to escape, but fail. They have hoarded several tons of extra supplies they receive. The Germans like the Brits, so they allow them to keep the extra supplies. The Brits feed the Americans well. The candles they have are made from the fat of Jews and gypsies killed in the concentration camps. The Brits put on a play of Cinderella. Billy laughs so hard they take him to the hospital. He lies there while Edgar Derby looks after him. Billy dreams he is a giraffe. Then he moves forward to his time as a mental patient in a veterans hospital in 1948. A former captain named Elliot Rosewater has a bed next to Billy's bed. He introduces Billy to science fiction novels, especially the work of Kilgore Trout. Billy hides under his sheet every time his mother visits, so she talks to Rosewater. Rosewater agrees with everything that she says, just to be nice. He returns to the hospital bed in the POW camp. He remembers seeing the future event when Edgar Derby is shot. One of the British officers comes to check on Billy. The officer is amazed at how young all the Americans are. Then Billy returns to the veterans hospital. His fiancée, Valencia Merble, is there. Billy does not want to marry the fat, ugly Valencia, but he proposed anyway. Valencia asks him if he wants anything, like books. He tells her that Rosewater has plenty of books. One of Rosewater's books, by Kilgore Trout, is the story of an alien who read the Bible and said that the only real lesson from the Bible is not to kill anyone who is well connected. So he rewrote the Bible to make Jesus some poor nobody who God adopts as his son while Jesus is on the cross. Trout's books have excellent ideas, but they are written terribly. Rosewater does not think Trout has ever been out of the country because all the Earthlings are American. He tells Valencia that nobody knows where he lives because he is almost the only person to have ever heard of him. He actually lives in Ilium, where Billy lives. Billy will meet him later. Billy goes back to Tralfamadore, where he is displayed naked in a zoo. He has been there for 6 months and is used to the crowds. He cannot escape. He truthfully tells one of the aliens that he is about as happy there as he was Earth. Billy learns that there are 5 sexes on Tralfamadore and there are 7 on Earth. The sexes on Earth are actually in the 4th dimension, so he does not know that they exist. He does not know that they exist. He does not understand it, but they don't understand the way that he sees time. He does not understand why the Tralfamadorans are not appalled by the wars and murders on Earth, and he tells them that Earth is a danger to the universe. They tell him that they will actually destroy the universe. They tell him that they will actually destroy the universe while testing fuel for their flying saucers. He asks why they do not stop it, but they simply tell him that they always destroy the universe, and they always will destroy the universe. Billy asks them why they do not have wars. They say that they do have wars, but they choose to look at the good things instead, and that Earthlings should learn from that. Billy goes to his honeymoon. He has just had sex with Valencia, and he and she will have a son with 7 parents. She offers to lose weight for him, but Billy tells her that she does not need to, because he is a time traveler. He knows their marriage will be at least bearable all the way. 120, she asks Billy about the war, but Billy is full of secrets. She tries to get more out of Billy, but he does not say much. Billy goes back to the POW camp. He goes outside to take a pee, but he is stuck on a barbed wire fence. A Russian on the other side of the fence helps him get off the fence. Then Billy pees. He hears people that seem to be in serious trouble. He finds that the food made the American POWs very sick, and they are excreting everything they ate. Billy moves back to his honeymoon, then to the train taking him back to his army unit after his father's funeral. Back in the POW camp, a Brit carries in Paul Lazaro. The British officer Lazaro was trying to steal cigarettes from had broken his arm. The Brits all disliked the Americans. A German officer working at the camp translates a memo from an American Howard W. Campbell Jr., who joined the German army. The memo says that Americans are mostly poor, but the poor dislike themselves because they believe they can make money. However, it is very hard to make money, so they hate themselves for reasons beyond their control. Americans dislike any other American who attempts to lead them. In 1968, Billy is being treated like a child by his daughter. She asks about the heat, but Billy does not notice the furnace is not working. She sends Billy to bed and calls the furnace repairman. On Tralfamadore, Montana Wildhawk is brought in naked and under sedation. She wakes up, sees the aliens, and screams. The zookeeper orders a blue tarp to be placed over their glass bowl to prevent anybody from seeing the unpleasantness of Wildhack's terror. Eventually, Montana begins to trust Billy and love him. She sleeps with him after 1 week of confinement. In 1968, the furnace repairman tells Billy that everything is fixed. He had a wet dream about Montana while back. The next day, he goes to work at his office. He tells a boy about his adventures on Tralfamadore, and the receptionist sends Billy home. Chapter 6. Billy wakes up in the POW camp. He feels an animal magnetism, 136, coming from his coat. He feels something in the pockets, but he does not check them. The next morning, the Brits are building a new latrine and a new theater to replace the ones that the Americans are using. Some of the Brits walk through the hospital. The officer who broke Lazaro's arm asks Lazaro how he is. Lazaro tells the Brit that he will have him killed after the war. The Brit is unimpressed. Then Lazaro tells Billy that he is going to have all of his enemies killed after the war, including Billy, who killed his friend Roland Weary. Billy knows that he dies in 1976. He is leaving a lecture he gave at a packed baseball stadium in Chicago. The United States has been divided into 20 nations for the sake of world peace. Billy does not mind the fact that he is about to die. He laughs about it and has the crowd do the same. The police try to protect him, but he simply tells them to go home to their families. Then Paul Lazaro shoots Billy in the head with a laser rifle. In 1945, Billy, Lazaro, and Derby walk back to the theater where the Americans are housed. A Brit is marking a line dividing the American and British sections of the camp. In the theater, Billy sees the silver boots used by the man who played Cinderella because he needs new boots. He tries them on and they fit perfectly. The American pals have an election to choose a leader, and Edgar Derby is elected because nobody else seems to care. A British man tells the Americans that they are going to Dresden that afternoon. It is an open city, so it will not be bombed. The Americans are fed, and they keep their food down this time. Billy leaves for Dresden wearing Cinderella's silver boots, a toga made of the piece of the curtain used for the play, and carrying his civilian coat like a muff. The Americans arrive in Dresden. The city is still unaffected by the war. The Americans walk through the city. A surgeon angrily taunts Billy for being dressed so comically. Billy shows him the diamond that was in his coat. The Americans are marched to their lodgings in Slaughterhouse-Five. Chapter 7. Billy Pilgrim gets onto a chartered airplane with several other optometrists. A barbershop quartet on the plane sings some bawdy songs at the request of Billy's father-in-law. Billy takes a momentary trip back to the woods in Luxembourg. Then the plane crashes into the side of a mountain. Billy is the only survivor. 2 Austrian skiers find him and take him to the hospital. Billy dreams about Dresden. He dreams about working at a factory that made syrup for pregnant women. Everyone stole spoonfuls of syrup because it tasted good and it was enriched with vitamins and minerals. Billy stole some syrup. Edgar Derby saw him, and Billy gave him some too. Chapter 8. 2 days before the bombing of Dresden, Howard J. Campbell Jr. tries to recruit the American POWs to join an American unit of the German army. Nobody joins. Edgar Derby gives Campbell a stirring response to his attempt at recruiting, saying that no decent American would join the Nazis. The next night, Dresden is bombed, killing 130,000 people. Then, Billy's daughter is telling Billy that she could kill Kilgore Trout. Kilgore Trout lives in a rented basement in Ilium, New York. Billy meets Trout as he is yelling at paperboys to sell the Ilium Gazette and attempting to bribe them to do it. As Billy walks up to him, one of the paperboys quits. Then Billy asks Trout if he is the writer Kilgore Trout. Trout never thought that anyone had ever heard of him. As he helps Trout deliver the route for the paperboy who quit, Trout tells him that he had only had one fan letter. It was from Elliot Rosewater. Trout thought Elliot was 14 because the letter was so insanely written. Billy invites Trout to his 18th wedding anniversary. Trout has a good time because everyone is actually interested in him because he is a writer. He lies to a pretty young lady to entertain himself. Billy is about to give Valencia an expensive ring for their anniversary. However, a barbershop quartet there sings a song that affects Billy badly. He is suddenly ill. Trout says that Billy must have seen through a time window, 174. Billy denies it and hands Valencia the ring. He walks around the party trying to act normal, but Trout follows Billy around. He believes in time travel and espy, and he wants someone to prove them. The barbershop quartet sings another song, and Billy is suddenly ill again. He runs upstairs to the bathroom. His son is sitting on the toilet with a guitar he will never learn to play. Billy retreats to his room and turns on the vibrating bed. He remembers Dresden. He is in the basement of the slaughterhouse with the other American pals and 4 German guards. He is listening to the bombs falling on the city. One of the guards looks outside every so often and tells the other guards that the entire city is burning. They cannot safely come out until the next day. The city is like a moonscape. The 4 German guards were like the barbershop quartet at his anniversary party. Billy is in the Tralfamadoran Zoo. Montana asks for a story. Billy tells her about the bombing of Dresden. In Dresden, the guards line the Americans up in ranks of 4. They march through the streets and see utter desolation. The stones of the buildings are still hot from the fire. They expect everybody in the city to be dead, and any living person seems to be a flaw. American fighter planes look for people moving fire at the POWs and hit some of them. The Americans go to an inn in Dresden suburbs that is run by a blind man and his wife. They had not seen another living person on the road. The guards sleep in the inn, and the POWs sleep in the inn, and the POWs sleep in the stable. Chapter 9. Billy is in the hospital after the plane crash. He is unconscious. Valencia, who dearly loves her husband, races to the hospital. She gets into an accident on the way that smashes up the back of her car. However, it is still drivable. She drives it to the hospital and parks. She cries in the car without turning it off. Fumes from the ruined exhaust get into the car, and she dies of carbon monoxide poisoning. Billy is unconscious and does not know anything about this. His roommate is Bertrand Copeland Rumford, a 70-year-old retired brigadier general who acts as if he is half that age. He is a professor and the official Air Force historian. His new wife, his 5th, is 23. She comes in to give her Bertrand a stack of books about the United States Army Air Corps in World War I. As Billy talks to himself in his delirium, he scares Mrs. Rumford and bores General Rumford. Rumford has his wife read him the official statement from Harry Truman about the bombing of Hiroshima. He also receives a book about the bombing of Dresden. Barbara arrives at the hospital, doped up pills that will help her function now that her father is broken and her mother is dead. She tries to talk to Billy. Billy goes back to 1958 when he is trying to prescribe corrective lenses for a Mongolian idiot. Then he goes to a time when he is 16 and waiting for a doctor to look at his infected thumb. Billy wakes up in the hospital after the plane crash. His son Robert, the Green Beret, is there and looking very good. He straightened out a very bad life in the army. Billy misses Valencia's funeral. He seems to be insensible, but his mind is actually assembling letters about his experience on Tralfamadore. Rumford thinks that Billy is a vegetable and says that Billy is a vegetable and says that they should let Billy die. He talks about trying to find information about the Dresden raid, but it is hardly mentioned anywhere. He says that people have heard about it and will want to know more. Billy says that he was there in Dresden. Rumford thinks he is just echoing things that other people are saying. Billy returns to Dresden. He and 5 other Americans are riding in a wagon 2 days after the end of World War II. He and the other Americans are out hunting for souvenirs. A husband and wife, both obstetricians, point out that the horses pulling the wagon had bleeding mouths, cracked hooves, and they were very thirsty. The Americans never noticed this. The 2 Germans look at Billy, still dressed in the toga and silver boots. They yell at him about the horses. Billy looks at the horses and cries for the first time in the war. Billy returns to the hospital. He tells Rumford about everything in Dresden, including the Russians arriving and arresting everybody. Then, 2 days later, he was sent back to the Americans. Rumford says that it had to be done. Billy agrees and says that it was all right because everything is all right. Barbara takes Billy home. Billy sneaks out and drives to New York City. He goes to a pornography store with Kilgore Trout novels in the front as a cover for their real business. He sees a picture of Montana Wildhack. Another man shows him a copy of the photograph of the woman with the Shetland pony. Billy gets onto a talk radio show and tells the listeners all about Tralfamadore. He is kicked out of the studio. He goes back to the hotel and travels back to Tralfamadore. Montana Wildtuck tells him that he has been time traveling again. She is nursing their baby. He tells her about his experience in New York. Billy looks at a locket hanging between her breasts. Written on it is the prayer he hung on the wall in his office. It starts with, "God grant me the serenity." 209. Chapter 10. Vonnegut tells the reader about people dying and the fact that his father left him several guns after he died. They rust. 210. Then Vonnegut mentions that Billy Pilgrim says that Tralfamadorans are more interested in Darwin than Jesus because Darwin said that things die because they are meant to die because they are meant to die, and corpses are improvements. 210. Vonnegut says he hopes Billy Pilgrim is right and people never die. Then he reminisces about his trip to East Germany. Billy Pilgrim returns to 1945 in Dresden. He and the other prisoners are sent into Dresden to sift through the rubble. They open one building and find dozens of bodies that they begin to pull them out. As the bodies begin to rot, they cannot manage to do that, so German soldiers just fire flamethrowers into the holes. The Maori man Billy works with dies from throwing up so much. Eventually, the German soldiers leave to fight the Russians and the civilians dig rifle pits around the city. Then the war ends. Billy and some other soldiers find the wagon. A bird sitting on a branch says to Billy, "Poo eat, wheat."